and welcome to PODS launch and celebration for 7.0.1. I'm Kathy Mayo. I'm the Executive Director of PODS Association, and I'd like to welcome all of you. Normally, this would be our fall conference, but as all of you know, these aren't normal times. And so again, we are glad to be able to broadcast to you and come to you through a webinar. This session will be recorded, so any of you who want to invite your colleagues to view this later, we invite you to do that. At this time, I would like to introduce Todd Patterson. Todd is with Buckeye, and he is PODS president of the board. Todd, welcome.
Thank you, Kathy, and hello, everyone. On behalf of the PODS board, I would like to welcome you all to the PODS 7.0.1 launch celebration. We're excited to have you join us to hear about developments related to the new release of the PODS data model. And although thanks to COVID, we cannot be meeting in person as we originally planned, we have a great agenda for our time together. I'd like to thank everyone involved with making this session happen. There's been a lot of hard work, not only to get to the release of the new data model, but also to plan and replan a conference. Before we get started, I want to recognize the members of the PODS board. Jeff Allen with Esri, Daniel Bally with ExxonMobil, Dale Boyett, our Technical Committee on Governance Chair with DCP Midstream, Natalie Fisher with Enbridge Pipeline, Paul Herman with Chevron, Chad Holtman with ONEOK, Rick Roberts, Secretary with Petro IT, Jackie Smith, VP with Rosen Group, and Kelly Rona, Secretary with Williams. Thank you to the board members for their time and dedication. It takes a lot of effort to be able to support PODS on a volunteer basis. And certainly we want to thank all of you for joining today and everyone who's made today's sessions happen. Kathy, back to you.
Thank you. So of course my screen is frozen and not advancing. You know, of course, those things happen with technology. Again, though, I'd like to echo what Todd said. A lot of work has gone into getting us to this point with the release of 7.0.1, and we have so many people to thank for this. So I would also like to follow up on introductions and introduce to all of you Amber Charbonneau, who is PODS Membership and Communications Coordinator. Amber has been with PODS for about 7 months now. She's fantastic to work with. I'm really excited that she's part of our team and would like to welcome her. I'd also like to acknowledge John Utley. John has joined PODS Association as our technical coordinator, and he follows on the heels of Christopher Moravec, who has gone on to do additional things with Dymaptic. But Christopher is joining us today, so I'd like to express my thanks to him for being with us. I'm gonna get out of slide mode, and my whole system is frozen up. So let me just close this. And as Todd said, we have a great agenda for you. We're going to hear about some PODS about 7.0.1 and some of our module development. We will share with you some of the training that we've done around this, and then hear from a panel who have actually implemented PODS 7 or are in the planning stages. And then we will do a membership report. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Dale Boyett, the chair of PODS Technical Committee on Governance, and Christopher Moravec, like I said, our previous technical coordinator, but someone who still provides enormous help and expertise to PODS Association. Thank you for being here.
All right, thanks, Kathy. So if you haven't heard, we're here to celebrate the rollout of PODS 7.0.1. If you haven't heard, then you're not living under a rock. We've all been living under a rock for about 1.5 years. We've gone into this virtual world of trying to get things done, And I think it's really amazing that we're able to roll out the release of pods in that type of an environment where most people are working from home. I think some developers are used to that, but anyway, it's a different environment to roll out a data model in. Also, I want to remind everyone that PODS is a volunteer organization. And what that means is that we don't do this all day long, right? This isn't our day job. We have most of us have 40-hour a week jobs, and we do this either in our spare time or if our companies are gracious enough, they let us work on some of this stuff during the day, but a lot of it's done after hours. So people really did go out of their way to get this done. One thing to say is you can't have a pod 7.0.1 without a pod 7.0. And that's been rolled out a few years ago, and it was really the building blocks for where we're at today. And so with pod 7.0.1, and that is the real name of it. It's not 701, it's not 70.1 or any of those things. It's 7.0.1. We have a lot of people to recognize for the work that they did. Okay, co-chairs of the committee that were really rolling out really both of these releases. Chad Corcoran with Marathon and Pete Veenstra with Pivot. Both of them did an enormous amount of work, and I want to thank both of them for the work they've done. And especially Chad, I've been able to work with him since coming on as the TCG chair, and he's helped me a lot with moving forward and making sure that there's an easy, there's some synergy in the things that we do. Committee members for this work are Craig Hawkins, Dan Palazzola, Kirk Cameron, Michael Ray, and Buddy Nagel. And two people who did work on this, were mostly volunteer, but some of it's contracted, and we do have contractors that work for us. But Kurt Bueller of Image Matters did a great deal of work, and also Christopher Moravec, which you see next to me with Dymaptic. He's done a lot of work with the release as well. And I've really enjoyed working with Christopher over the past year and a half in the technical committees that we worked through. So I want to hand it over to Christopher now for some comments about pod 7.0.1 and some of the things that you may notice in the new release. Christopher.
All right, thanks, Dale. So pod 7.0.1 is what I would classify as a maintenance release. That makes it sound like it's not that big a deal, but it really, a lot of work and a lot of things went into pod 7.0.1. In fact, if you look at some of the documentation and specifically the change log, it's just pages and pages of things that we did to the model. I'm not going to read that to you right now. That would probably bore us all to tears. But instead, I'm going to go over some of the things that we did in the model. A lot of the things that we did were minor changes, things like fixing data types, fixing spelling errors, ensuring that relationships existed the way they were supposed to. But there were a few larger things that we did to kind of set the stage for future modules that PODS is working on now. So again, you can find all of this in the change log. I'll just hit some of the highlights. So there were several data types that had to get fixed. For example, all of the measure fields were number 3, which means they had too many places after the decimal, so they're all number 2 now. Things like wall thickness and outside diameter fields have all been standardized so that they have the same data types. Making sure that code lists all have default values set correctly, and making sure that fields that are nullable are nullable, and things that should not be nullable are not. Kind of one that was an interesting case is the preserve relate identifier field. And that field was originally designed so that when you're loading data into pod 7, you had a way to point back to your historic data or your previous PODS database or whatever other types of data you're bringing data from. And that was a GUID or a UUID, and that didn't work in a lot of cases. So that's now text, so that you can load a GUID into it, you can load a number into it, or you can even load a URL to a document management system. That way you can really preserve that original data source when you're bringing that in. We also changed a few places of inheritance. That's the way certain tables behave and appear within the model. The most important one, I think, is launcher receiver, which was simply an online point, and that is now equivalent pipe asset. And equivalent pipe asset is probably one of the most powerful things within the PODS event model, simply because it allows you to have something that is a point like launcher receiver, but have it with a relationship to a pipe segment record that contains all of that pipe specific information about that point, and can also be linear. So you can get you get the power of having that point event for a launcher receiver, but you also have a linear event in your pipe segment that represents it. So you kind of get the best of both worlds there. There's a few other kind of housekeeping things like spelling fixes. For example, metadata was inconsistent throughout the model. It is now always uppercase, one word, no underscore, metadata. Easement was misspelled in several places, though it's now spelled correctly. And we moved a few attributes. There were some attributes, is piggable and is smart piggable, a couple of attributes in that family there. This was pretty hotly debated at the time, but ultimately these attributes are now in pipe segment. And that's because whether or not a piece of pipe is piggable is really a property of the pipe. I know that's kind of goes against previous versions of PODS and the way a lot of folks think about things. So a lot of people tend to think that, oh, well, I want to know if this route or this entire segment is piggable or not. And you can still figure that out, but now the is piggable attribute is actually assigned to pipe segment. And as with always, you can add on to PODS and make it your own. Two more changes that we did here. We added a repair table, and that's really to help facilitate things in the future so that we can track, so that you can track repairs as a user of POD 7, but so that other modules can also use it. And then we also added physical inspection table, a physical inspection table and some relationships. And there's actually a design, a simple design of the way this works inside the changelog. And it's mostly designed to take care of future modules that we're adding. So things like ILI, so that all inspections can really be implemented in a standard way, so that you have one way to find inspections and one way to manage the geometry of those inspections. So that physical inspection table and its associated tables and relationships was added to do that. So that was just a lightning fast overview of some of the stuff we did in 701. Almost all of these things that we did were found during user testing and reports from the membership telling us what was wrong. And then a last few things were found during testing, which, as a lot of you are probably aware now, we've beefed up that testing program so that when we do a release, we're a lot more confident in the way that it's going to behave when we get it out there. But going forward, it still depends on the membership testing things and reporting back and saying, hey, this doesn't work for us, or we'd rather see things like this. That feedback is incredibly valuable to the committees, and I just want to reiterate that the more of that you all can do as the membership, the better for the organization. And I think that's about it. I guess, Kathy, this goes back to you now.
I'll take it.
Okay.
So one thing that I would like to kind of add to what Christopher said was, remember that we made many changes to the PODS tables and schema and different things like that. But at the same time, you have to document all that. And I think one of the things that many people don't realize is how much work goes into the documentation. and reiterating, the importance of putting out data dictionaries, the conceptual model. If things change, everywhere that you have to look to make sure that that documentation gets updated. And it's important for the community, because if you don't know what changed in the model, that's whenever you run into problems when you begin to load data. And so I just kind of want to call out that a lot of work was done there as well. So anyway, if you have any questions on PODS 7.0.1, I'm assuming we can just put questions out there, and we will try to follow up or answer them while we're on the call. So if you're looking at the slideshow, our next item is PODS subcommittees, and we've got two different speakers that'll be coming up. We got Tad Nowicki to talk about our ILI module, and we also have Jeff Allen that will be coming in to talk about the utility network. So we have been working on PODS ILI. I'm gonna let Tad talk about it mostly, but I know that people have been kind of awaiting its rollout, and so we want to give you an update of where we are. So Tad, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Absolutely. Hey, good morning, everyone. As Dale mentioned, my name is Tad Nowicki. I'm a compliance consultant at Rosen, which is primarily an ILI company. So naturally, I was volunteered to help support the ILI module development. And basically, I'm here, as he mentioned, to provide a little bit of update on that PODS 7 ILI module. Real quick before I get into it, I would like to say thank you to the ILI working group. We spent quite a few years. I came on at the later part, so I definitely want to give credit to all of those that were on it since the beginning, including people like Cameron, Daphne Gruinski, Ron Brush, Lauren Kaufman, Buddy Nagel, Aaron Rell, and Victor Rutherford. I may have missed a couple. I apologize if I did, but that's just kind of the group that I had. And then really obviously kind of really giving credit to Diane and Kurt for their leadership for that team to really kind of push that to completion. So basically, this group was made up of a mix of volunteers. It included a few pipeline operators, some ILI vendors, and then some pipeline data experts. Really, the intent of this module is to provide an MVP or a minimum viable product. Really kind of meaning that the intent is that it's not perfect, right? It's 90% of the way there. It's good enough that any operator could bring it in and use it. And then ultimately, as Christopher mentioned earlier as well, that it can be expanded and modified as needed for your organization. Basically, it consists of two tables. So this module consists of two tables. There's the ILI data table, which basically is a replica of the pipe tally. So the intent is that you can just load your pipe tally information, so the data that you would receive from an ILI vendor, and you can put that directly into your pipe, into your pod system, and store it that way. And then there is also the ILI inspection table, which covers more inspection parameters, such as which tool was used, whether it was an MFLA, a combo tool, geometry, the inspection dates, the links that the line was inspected, average tool velocities, those types of things. So there's kind of maybe what you consider the metadata for the inspection itself in that ILI inspection table. And then there is the ILI data table, which houses the actual data from the inspection. So in July of this year, so let's see, that was 4 months ago or 3 months ago, the ILI working group that I mentioned before, we wrapped up all of the conceptual stages. We all agreed upon what data should be included in each table, the metadata fields, the domains included in those, and it was approved by the TCG, and it is now actually over with the TCDM for modeling. So with TCDM, unfortunately, I don't have a great status update for you guys there, but it's been with them now for about 2 months. They are overcoming some technical hurdles associated with the import script and the enterprise architect, also called EA, that the version that it is in, just to disconnect between the two. So they've moved through those issues there, and they are currently working on actual modeling that database. But as I mentioned, I don't actually have a definitive timeline for completion of this module. That might be something that somebody else may hint at or give an update to later in the session this morning. And that's all I've got for you guys this morning. Back over to you, Dale.
Thanks, Tad. So to kind of bring everyone up to speed when we roll out a module like this, first of all, the ILI module is a large module. Whenever I say that, it's complicated. That means that a lot of work has to go into it. So, as our first model to try to tackle something as important as ILI was a really, really big feat. But whenever you're putting together this model, basically you are meeting to figure out what fields need to be added in. You're getting input from different operators, different vendors who know the data that needs to be in the tables, looking at past versions of PODS. And so it's really a big hodgepodge of trying to figure out what do we include, right? What is not used anymore? And so it's a daunting task to get past that. The reason I say that is that once you get past that and you know what the model is going to look like, you have it figured out, really you're down to doing the data modeling. And that's what Kirk Cameron and the TCDM are working on right now. So if I were to say, how far along are we, I would say we're well more than 50%, but probably in that 75% range. We have goals. We know when we want to get it out, but we're not kind of ready to commit to that. But we're trying our best to get this done before the end of the year, and we'll keep everyone updated on it and try to let you know if we run into roadblocks or anything like that might change. All right, thanks, Tad. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jeff Allen. Jeff has been working with our committee that is handling utility network integration with PODS, or maybe even vice versa. It's a collaboration between the two technologies, and let him give an update on where we are with utility network and PODS.
Cool. Thanks, Dale, and thanks, everybody. So the utility network is a sort of an interesting topic for us here at PODS. It really stems from the work we did starting at PODS 7. So back at PODS 7, one of the things that we endeavored to do is add some more support to the model to allow operators who are using Esri technology to edit that PODS database directly. And we did that by adding some core tables to support ArcGIS pipeline referencing. That support extended into 7.01 today. So if you open up the current model and you have access to the Esri toolset, you can start editing that data model directly. One of the things that it did, though, was kind of left a gap that we've always had relative to how pipes are connected together. So linear referencing does a really great job of modeling dense data sets along transmission lines, and that's where it's traditionally been used. But if we look at that entire supply chain, we look at upstream gathering or pipes that are inside the fence, things that we would typically call non-station pipe. It's always been a challenge to model and map that data inside a linear referencing system. So one of the new technologies from Esri is called the utility network. Obviously, as the name would suggest, it was first designed for utilities, gas distribution, water, and electric, but can be used on any piping system at all. And we feel that there's a real sort of fit here in the transmission space to be able to not only be able to expand the amount of pipe that we can map inside the fence, upstream gathering, but also be able to create a connected model of those routes along the transmission line. And once I have a connected model, I can ask the system all kinds of interesting things, like what is my system MAOP, or show me all the test leads that are connected to this cathodic protection system. So it really opens up and allows us to build a whole bunch of new value on top of the PODS data model. But to add that support, we actually have to conform to the underlying utility network information model. And I'm very cautious of calling it an information model and not a data model, because those core feature classes and core tables really are the same relative to a pipe network or a water distribution network or an electric network. They're there for performance reasons, and they're there to kind of standardize some of the data as it relates to the software that sits on top of it. And so what this committee has been working on is taking the existing PODS model 7.01 and rearranging, I call it kind of rearranging the deck chairs to make sure it's compatible with the utility network. And so we're mapping the key feature classes, conforming it to the underlying information model for the utility network, and making that compatible so you can use that tool out of the box. We started that mapping work early last year, but we actually had an operator step forward and say, hey, we've got a project. This project is important to us, and we can't wait. We need to move forward. And so with the help of Esri and TRC, we actually worked on that project with that operator, which is ONEOK. And ONEOK was very gracious to then say, hey, we know we're at the cutting edge. We know we're ahead of PODS, but we don't want to be off on our own version. So when we're finished, we'll donate that work back to the PODS organization, and the PODS organization can finalize that and put that into the core model. And so we've entered that phase. The ONEOK team, along with the help from TRC and Esri, have done a version 1 of their model. They've converted data into it, and they're starting their push towards production. And that model has now been, that work has now been donated back to the PODS working group. So the PODS working group has a meeting scheduled for next week or the week after next, within the next 2 weeks, to kind of regroup, take the work that's been done. So even though it may feel that the working group hasn't been doing anything for a while, there's been work ongoing in parallel with us, and basically review that work, make sure it conforms to the POD standards, add anything that ONEOK might have needed to remove for their business operations, or look at any additions that the ONEOK team came up with and see how that fits into the greater schema. Finalize that work and then push that out as a working version. We don't really see this as another version of PODS. It's simply just an implementation pattern. It will look different than a standard PODS 7.01 implementation, just because it has to conform with an underlying data model. But we're not adding any new sort of business logic. We're not adding any new tables or fields, but we are standardizing a couple things. One of the interesting things about the utility network is it does include a rule base. So we can now add business rules to the model. We can say, hey, a 12-inch pipe can't connect to a 14-inch pipe without a reducer in between. So that does require us to standardize some of the domain codes within PODS, so we can build a rule base about it. So you will get that advantage as well. There's just a couple of key fields. We call them the asset group and asset type. But once we define those in the utility network, we can then define rules against those type lists, and then push that out as part of the POD standard as well as you implement it. It'll be delivered most likely as what we call an asset package, which is basically just a file geodatabase flattened that includes all those rules and the underlying data model. And then there's some Esri tools that allow you to easily lift that asset package and deploy it into an enterprise geodatabase and then start working with it. Basically, in that implementation pattern, your fittings under pressure, your pipes, your devices and junctions go into the utility network, and we create routes and calibration points on top of those pipes. So we then have the ability to combine utility network tracing and all its functionality with RTS pipeline referencing, linear referencing, and have the two work together. So you can have both stationed and non-stationed pipe in the same enterprise geodatabase working together. And this is a concept that operators have been asking us for years for, and we think there's a lot of business use and business value that can be built on top of that model to bring to your organizations. So we're excited for this work. We're excited to wrap it up and get it out there into the industry and see what you guys can do with it. For that, I'll turn it back to Dale.
So just a question, Jeff, and maybe you can kind of speak to this. What type of experience has it been with the model working? How is it performing? How are things going now that it's kind of been in place?
Yeah, I mean, one of the advantages of having to twist the model into that utility network information model is that when we at Esri developed that core utility network, one of the big considerations was the performance issues, right? When we think about a electric utility and thousands of miles of poles and meters and transformers, right? All that working together and connected in an enterprise geodatabase, there had to be some real performance implications to that. So we generally don't see that level of complexity in transmission pipelines. Often we see it in the upstream gathering side. Traditionally, we see it a lot in the downstream distribution of gas. But so far, the reception we've gotten from the ONEOK team is that it's really met the requirements they had for their project, which was bringing 3 distinct PODS databases together into one central system to support both gathering, gas transmission, and liquids transmission in one central model.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and thanks all those that have been part of the utility network committee and all the hard work, and especially a big thanks to the people at Esri who have labored over this, and ONEOK for kind of hosting, kicking off this effort. I've been in organizations where you're the first one to do it, and it's a scary place to be. So kudos to everyone that did work on this. All right, that pretty well wraps up a lot of the technical items that we had on our agenda today. So I will turn it back over to Kathy, and she can introduce our next speakers.
Hey, Dale, thank you so much. And thank you, Tad and Jeff, for providing us an update on the important work that you're doing. One thing that's really important to us at PODS and PODS Association is explaining and repeating and continuing to create an understanding, a good foundation of what PODS 7.0.1 is. And one important program that we've had is our training program and PODS Fundamentals. Julie Parker with Teach Me GIS has been our trainer for that. She's been doing a great job for PODS Association. And I'd like to call on her right now to share a bit about what that fundamentals training looks like and what the journey has been. So welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. With the help of Kathy and the PODS Education Committee, I've created and delivered 3 6-unit training events for the PODS organization over the past 18 months or so. Today, many of the participants in this session have been in this season's program, and they are joining this as their final session in the series. So hopefully they have logged in and are taking advantage of this final unit. I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking a little bit about what we've done, what we've covered in these sessions. And so I'll step you through some of these topics that we've focused on as we've gone through these 3 sessions, and just to help you understand a little bit more about what this training has been all about. So in all 3 sessions, we've geared our material towards those who had little to no familiarity with PODS or the organization PODS. So we kind of had to start at the beginning. So we began with our first session, which focused mainly on PODS fundamentals. Our emphasis was on PODS organization itself, its purpose and its role in developing and improving PODS data standards and models. We also focused on database and data model basics, as they related to PODS data models. We began by first answering the question, what is PODS? What is PODS the organization? What are the PODS data standards as exemplified by the data models? The basic database and the data model concepts and elements were also really foremost in our training at this point. We also introduced linear referencing as a way of managing and depicting the pipeline data in GIS. In the second season, we repeated many of these same concepts from the first season, but we began focusing more on PODS 7.0. We illustrated the evolution of PODS models 2 through 6 and how PODS 7 stood in contrast. During this segment, we also began talking about what you get when you download the PODS model. At the beginning of the third season, this most recent season of PODS training, we continued to answer the key questions as we did previously, such as what is PODS and why PODS, but with a more concerted attention on the PODS 7.0.1 model and its implementation. We talked about PODS 7.0.1 data model and databases as manifestations of the PODS data standards as they've evolved to this point. Our emphasis in this series was on answering questions such as, well, how does the PODS data model work? How are the databases structured in 7.0.1? Will it work in my organization? And how can it be tailored to fit my needs? We also talked about how a company's data can fit into the PODS data model. And also a burning question was answered about exactly how does my data get in there. We spoke generally about PODS matters, why PODS matters in previous sessions, but in this most recent season, we doubled down on the fact that PODS matters. All facets of pipeline systems and networks matter. People managing or working with pipelines matter. And lastly, pipeline information matters. I'd like to take just a couple more minutes and dwell on these facets. The value of people, the importance of PODS.org, the individuals as well as the organizations who believe in the value of standards-based pipeline data management. The fact that PODS.org is member-driven, and the fact that community and consensus-driven data standards, model, and training are the best practices. I'd also like to talk about the value of pipeline information. Promoting pipeline data as an asset has been a key point in all three modules, but it was especially hit upon in this last season because we feel so strongly that we need to continually reinforce the idea as pipeline data as an asset of an organization. And also, secondarily, but no less important, PODS as the container of choice for managing this pipeline data. We know that it doesn't begin with PODS 7.0.1 or 7.0. It's been the success of the previous data model versions that have continuously demonstrated the value of PODS data management and seasons that we focus on here. I feel that by the end of our series, participants know the value of PODS.org, the PODS data standards and the models. They know not just why PODS exists, but also that PODS and its mission matters. More importantly, they know how to become PODS members and how to begin implementing PODS data standards and models into their own organizations. They know how to start some of those conversations. And so before I conclude my remarks, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank all the individuals who have shared their knowledge and experience with PODS and the pipeline industry. Without their contributions of time and knowledge, this training series would not have been successful. So I want to say thank you to our training committee, Kathy Mayo, Dale Boyette, Eugene Lamb, who is no longer with the committee, but also Rick Roberts, Patricia Dolbin, Hazel Herrera, and Jackie Smith. I'd also like to thank Jeff Allen from Esri, who has stepped in all 3 seasons to talk about linear referencing and also UNet. So thank you to all of you, and thank you for those that have been spreading the word about these sessions. I hope that they have proven to be an asset to the PODS organization. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for your attention and turn things back over to Kathy.
Julie, thank you so much. You know, in hearing from this first set of speakers, it really fills me with pride in their commitments to PODS data standards and the data that goes into the PODS in your organizations. And what this really represents is a responsiveness of the association to what we have heard from operators, service providers, and others. And so what it culminates in is this 7.0.1 release, which is, you know, what you heard previous had been asked for by PODS members. And what we have now, as others have pointed out, Julie pointed out, is a stronger, well-documented data standard. So next, what I'd like to do is turn it over to a panel discussion, and we can hear from those who have implemented PODS or are in the planning stages of implementing PODS 7.0.1. I will turn it over to Luke Hootmacher, who is moderating this session, and have him introduce our panelists. Welcome to all of you. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. Can I get permissions to share a single slide?
Yes.
I don't want to derail the thing. So everybody, welcome. Luke Hootmacher, GIS manager for, there we go, share now. Share a single slide. There we go. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We've got Katie Rich and Luke Hamlin here from Williams and Chevron. So we got 2 Luke H's. So that'll be nice and confusing. I'm assuming, guys, we can see the single slide. Luke, is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So Katie and Luke have both been going through different iterations of PODS upgrades and implementations over the last couple of years. So we wanted to have them on to talk about some of that stuff. And this is interactive. Please type in questions in the chat, and we'll get to them. We got half an hour or so. We got about 5 or 6 bullet points of items to talk about. But first off, I'd just like for each of you guys to take a second, introduce yourself personally, professionally, and then kind of give a little bit of a description on how your organization has been working with PODS over the last 5 to 10 years, and what you think you have going on in the future. So, Katie, go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here today. As Luke said, my name is Katie Rich. I have been in the pipeline GIS business for about 11 years now. Started at Chesapeake Midstream in Oklahoma City in 2010, and then spun off with their Access Midstream sale. And then finally, when Williams acquired fully Access Midstream, moved into the Williams organization and moved to Tulsa about 4.5 years ago. So currently, I lead the GIS and the asset management teams for Williams. So I've got the centralized GIS database and team, and then also the Maximo maintenance management system and team that manages that. And that was actually a pretty exciting org change a couple of years ago or about 1.5 years ago to pull those 2 asset systems together under one leader. So that's been pretty exciting to see the synergies, and probably could talk a long time about the synergies between those 2 systems. But to give you a little bit of a history about our GIS, when I came into the Williams organization, I was just one of many acquisitions they had done over the years, you know, Transco, Northwest Pipeline, and then Access Midstream and several other gathering systems along the way. And so we really were at a point in 2017 that we had about 5 different GIS databases. Reporting at an enterprise level was really difficult, very time consuming. We had GIS analysts that couldn't really share work because, you know, some of them worked in a PODS version 4 environment with an Intrepid front end. Some worked in a pure, you know, kind of homegrown STE GIS. Some worked in, you know, other different flavors. And so we really couldn't leverage our workforce, you know, in an agile way because we were all working in different things. We also had duplicative software. You know, we had a couple different editing tools. We had a couple different classification tools. And so really we recognized that we could gain a lot of efficiencies by doing a system integration and a consolidation. So we got approval in 2017 to start what we called our GIS 2.0 program. And in that project, over the course of about 2.5 years, implemented PODS 7.0 and UNet. So we did a kind of a hybrid implementation there to get the geospatial and kind of Esri editing based experience through UNet, but with the PODS standards and data model on top of that. So that's just a little bit of a history of what we've done. I can say we have about 28,000 miles of pipeline in 27 states. Actually, I think we're probably about over 30,000 miles now. We've got thousands of facilities. We're primarily gathering and processing. So we've got some natural gas storage. We've got some cryo plants. We've got some fractionators, and then lots of wellhead gathering facilities. We've got about 20 PODS unit editors in our environment, and then in total about 27 GIS analysts, some of them working more on the commercial and project side. We've got thousands of web map users and portal users, and then hundreds of our mobile users now too in the field. And yeah, I'll probably get into more detail on our project here in a bit, but that's just kind of the quick rundown. So that works.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Hamlin, you want to go introduce yourself?
All right, Luke Hamlin, Chevron Pipeline and Power. Again, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share with you folks. My current role is data architect for CPP Data and Insights, which is basically GIS and analytics team. I've been with CPP for 2 years. Came from upstream San Joaquin Valley Business Unit in California. I was there for 10 years, but ultimately I'm a GIS head of 20 years. Not a PODS expert by any means. I'm still a pipeliner in training. But about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I was in a new role, and we've decided to embark on this GIS modernization project. Modernization was and still is a buzzword in the organization. And I was asked to lead this GIS modernization effort. Well, what did that mean? Basically, we put our entire GIS stack on the table for modernizing, optimizing, right? So this included PODS migrating from PODS 4.0.1 to PODS 7, relational to spatial, migrating from Oracle on-prem to Azure SQL, migrating to a APR suite of tools for data maintenance and ArcGIS Pro, upgrading our field data collection solution, which is upgrading to Cartofact 9.x. I think it's actually 9.9. Not just that, but upgrading GPS hardware to Trimble 1, R1s, and R2s, upgrading to New Century's software Sheet Cutter in ArcGIS Pro, migrating web map applications from a GeoCortex platform to Portal for ArcGIS, and that includes an inline solution, a GeoCortex inline solution. We're upgrading Smart Footprint, which is our pipeline routing optimization tool in ArcGIS Pro, upgrading Spill Impact Analyst in ArcGIS Pro, migrating from on-prem file storage to a Documentum maintenance system and or data lake storage. With that, we are also migrating to modern desktop and Chevron's virtual workspace. So, a little bit of an undertaking there. Some people might call it stupid, or I'm okay with crazy. I'm okay with crazy, but we're in the middle of all of this. So that's kind of my personal past experience with PODS, not much. Present and where we're going, that's kind of where we are.
Excellent. I think that both of you described a situation that a lot of companies are in, which is we want to upgrade to a new specific technology. But while we're in there, we realize that there are a lot of things tied to that. So upgrading from PODS 4 to PODS 7 Esri geodatabase of some sort isn't always as simple as just taking stuff from one schema and putting it into another, right? You got applications, you got other things, and then you have things that we can capitalize on. As long as we're breaking this down into a new something, maybe we should consider moving into the cloud or something along those lines. So before you can get moving on it, you have to get some level of, I don't know, agreement or consensus within your company that this is something that we want to do. But it's going to have a lot of effects around people outside of our GIS analysts or our data editors. So, you know, the reason we put this on the list is because a lot of companies, I think, aren't sure how do I begin. It's kind of an elephant. How do I deal with this elephant? So, you know, if you have any thoughts on how did your organization come to the decision to make this move? And it's not just a PODS upgrade. You both described upgrades and modifications across many things in your organization. So let's start with Luke this time. You know, how did this come to be to say, all right, let's get to work?
All right. Well, it comes back to that buzzword, modernization. We're modernizing everything, right? Plus,
right.
Our current state was end of shelf life, pretty much, right? To me, it didn't make any sense to maintain spatial data in a non-spatial relational database and then spatialize it. So it seemed like the writing was on the wall. And you know, one of the main drivers as well was we needed to get off Oracle into this new Azure SQL environment. So yeah, cloud migration was one, modernization was the other, and then deprecating, decommissioning Oracle. We had some challenges, and we're still having challenges in our current environment with spatial sync issues, bridge stuff, just issues that kept causing outages, affecting users, and really, you know, affecting the trust that our users had in the technology, not just technology, but GIS, right, and the GIS team. So everything was pointing to modernization. So
yeah, well, and you have everybody is familiar with system of record, and when you're spatializing stuff and moving it to a different place for people to use, that system of record becomes hard to specifically identify, right? So moving into a baseline of a spatial geodatabase is obviously the first step, and pipelines are much more regulated now than they were when a lot of these systems were put in place 5 to 10 years ago. So Katie, how about you guys? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Thanks. One thing.
I'm not lip reader, so I don't know what you just said.
Understood. There's a couple of things here I'd like to touch on. One thing, I think we were fortunate in that we set up what we call our GIS steering committee back in 2016, and that's comprised of vice presidents at our company. So we have like 3 vice presidents, our CIO, our vice president of safety and operational discipline, and at the time, our vice president of project execution. And so I think it was really key having that group already in place. We'd already been meeting with them monthly, talking about GIS, talking about, what issues we had, what we're trying to work towards. So it really laid the groundwork for us to bring this request then in 2017 for, multi-million-dollar funding for a project that, I think was an easier case to bring because they'd already been acquainted with what we do. We'd already been able to share some of our wins and how we support the business. So I think that was a key advantage we had. We were also coming on the heels of some other consolidation and modernization efforts. Luke, that's been a big buzzword at our company too, and continues to be. And so our SCADA systems was being consolidated. Our measurement system had been consolidated. So that, we had seen there was a trend toward that. And so it wasn't a really hard sell to say, let's continue to do that with some of our major asset systems. And then finally, our business case was really driven by a couple pipeline safety and asset integrity drivers. So, we could show cases where, maybe we had gone and dug up a pipeline based on some data that the system told us, and then found that, well, we were just missing information, or we weren't integrating data like we needed to give us the right answer. And so we could show where we'd spent money that we didn't need to spend, or, risks of fines or risks of things on the safety and integrity side that, we could say if we pull this data together, we're managing it more holistically and we're integrating it, then we'll avoid some of those expenditures. So that was another key piece of our business case.
Yeah, and you touched on something when you were describing PODS, the ghost of PODS Pass, which is multiple systems for your different assets, right?
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be pretty common as well. Companies buying assets more than building assets, or
Mm-hmm.
2 systems of record. We got a PODS 4, a PODS 5, a APDM. It just makes it really difficult for people. So,
Yep.
being able to get all that stuff in one system is probably a good time.
Yeah, I forgot to mention ours is on an on-premise Oracle implementation. We're looking at potential cloud migration, but we went with the on-prem for now. We were a couple years too early for a lot of the cloud movement.
You can only juggle so many things at a given time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, one of our goals, selfish goals of this discussion, is so that everybody that's on this webinar goes back to their company to say we need to upgrade PODS. So let's do it. And the first thing that their manager or their director or their vice president is going to say, well, you got to tell me how much it's going to cost, right? So, let's talk about you're at kind of at different phases through your different migrations. It sounds like Williams is more in a production mode. Chevron is still into the modernization and getting stuff upgraded. So, what do you guys think about things you wish you knew then that you understand now, or nuances within this took a lot more time than we thought, or testing, or that kind of stuff, viability of applications when you saw them demonstrated versus in production, that kind of stuff. Katie, do you want to kind of talk about some of those? And this doesn't have to be a complaining session, right? We're just
Right.
Why everybody said every time I have start a project that I've never done around the house, I get done with it and go, man, I could have saved a lot of time if I'd did a little more research.
Plus, we have Esri representatives on the call.
Yeah.
We can pull Jeff back on here, man. I have no problem.
Yeah. Oh, Jeff's been our good buddy through all of this.
I'm still here. I'm listening.
I heard Esri used to be called Easy, but they had to change it to Esri because of there any truth to that?
Oh man. Well, yeah, we learned a lot. We have so many lessons learned that we love to share with others. So a couple of things that jump out to me is you can never have enough time for data migration QC. So I mean, you spend a lot of time designing the system and implementing, but then the migration part inevitably is a little bit squeezed because it's toward the end of a project you're trying to get done. And we definitely got to a point where we're like, okay, are we going live before the holidays or after? And
For sure.
we made the call to go before the holidays in November of 2019. And so you just never try to get as much time as you can to check the data migration, because I mean, when you're moving millions and millions of database records and you're basically scrambling it, coming from one place to another, there's just a lot to check. And so we had, of course, had some issues. I think for the vast majority, it was a huge success. When we got the data moved over, it was very successful. But you always have some things you need to clean up on the back end. Secondly, and related to that, in hindsight, I look back at it now. Actually, I was looking at our kickoff slide deck last night, and I'm kind of ashamed of myself a little bit for not having a pipeline safety or integrity person as a project sponsor. And they're not in they're under the same VP as my team, but we're not in the same group. I know some cases pipeline safety and GIS are together in other companies. So we certainly had members of those organizations in our project team, but we didn't have a sponsor from that organization. And we didn't have someone from the organization on the core team. So it was all, GIS and IT, and then we brought in other SMEs along the way. But I think in hindsight, we really needed pipeline safety and integrity to have more of an ownership in the whole project, because we're still dealing with a little bit of issues related to those data sets, just because we didn't have that strong partnership at the top, and so we had good support. I don't want to mischaracterize, but just something to think about. Like, really look at your stakeholder list and who needs to be at that sponsor level and driving lots of engagement, lots of understanding about what the system is going to do and look like. Because I think we got to the other end and there were some maybe some surprise by some of our stakeholders. So anyway, that was a big one that I came away with, and going back now certainly would have a much larger role for that group in the project. And then the last thing I'll say is proof of concept. If you can manage to do like a little kind of early adopter concept or proof of concept, we could have definitely used that in our gathering and processing assets. Transmission there's a lot of work been spent on those assets over the years, cleaning the data, making it a really good data set in a lot of the GMP areas. But some of those gathering assets, just don't have great survey data or aren't super robust. And then trying to put them into UNet and PODS has been a little bit of a headache. And so we could have learned more, maybe doing a proof of concept early on. So I'd recommend considering doing that just to learn and really understand when you're ready to go into a full-blown migration.
Sounds good. And Luke, you guys did do a proof of concept, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
What's that? Yeah. We did. Yeah.
You are still kind of in stride on your modernization efforts. So, feel free to tell us what's different right now.
We're certainly sprinting, learning along the way, taking some knocks here and there. But, going into this, the organization was going through a transformation, a full-on transformation. So we didn't know where folks were going to fall, if we were going to even have a team, right, or where our team would land. So, with that, everybody was forced to get out of their comfort zone, right? I had mentioned all the moving pieces, all the moving components before. And so we just took the divide and conquer approach. Everybody kind of had little, specialties that they took ownership. I think, we didn't have a project manager. We don't have basically, that's crazy, right? so we're kind of managing ourselves and all the moving pieces. So I think going back, if we had the resources at the time, I think it would have been helpful to have a project manager. I think we fared pretty well getting this far with the limited resources, but yeah, I mean it was pretty crazy at the beginning. With that, not just adopting to the new organization, but adapting the safe methodology. So
Yep.
scaled agile framework, that was all new to us too. So there's a bit of a learning curve there. But I think that became our project manager, right? We deliver in iterations, we get feedback, and we keep moving the project forward. So that worked out well for us, I think.
Well, and there's a big logistical component for you. You're doing a lot of stuff, and you're trying to minimize downtime.
Right, and this isn't the only thing. This it's a huge project, right? But it'll be nice to go back to regular work where we can do fun things. You know, we can deliver value to the business. You know, I wish I would have gone in with a better understanding of the new Azure infrastructure and how the different groups supporting the infrastructure. So if we needed to go get support for SDE, Azure SQL, we had no idea who to go to.
Yeah.
Under the new org, right? So you have a DB support team, but they don't know SDE, right? So it's like and keeping those relationships strong, knowing who to reach out to in these situations, right? Even though somebody has moved on to a new role, if we can still leverage their skill set, that's always a bonus.
So this means
some of the
be
challenges
nice to everyone all the time, right?
Yeah.
Well, GIS people have probably recognized this for a long time, but the administrative tier of GIS is a bit wonky in the past because we are GIS people using databases, but we're using SDE databases, and now we're using an ArcGIS enterprise environment that has its own set of nuances to administering it. And a lot of times this is going into a Azure or AWS environment, which also has its own thing. And then you're upgrading software and you're migrating data. So when you get an email that says this is wrong, there's 15 things I probably have to look at and 6 things that I probably need to have somebody fix, and that could be one of 5 people. You know, it's a big matrix of it'll make your head spin, right? I do a couple of things that I have to add just from our experience on doing a lot of these migrations over the year. I think that SME access for things like data consolidation efforts tend to be logistically complicated. You need somebody from safety or from integrity to help you do some domain cleanup. When you're migrating 3 databases into one, that means you have 3 coding tables or material tables, and A.O. Smith is spelled 5 different ways. Well, that's kind of an easy one, but when you're talking about specific coding types, I mean, I would put that, if you did like the word cloud of stuff, coding would probably be the biggest one. It would be bigger than ArcGIS Enterprise on the list of things. And then I would reiterate QA, QC, testing and training time. There is a learning curve in any of these upgrades that everyone just needs to keep in mind. You're replacing software that some of your end users have been using for 10 to 15 years with something that's brand new. And if they're not GIS users, It's, you know, there's a learning curve in that, and you need to factor that in when you're talking about, we have some regulatory obligations to get stuff as built in a certain amount of time. So I would definitely consider that, and then thoroughly documenting all the stuff that your GIS touches, because when you flip the switch and you go into downtime and then you turn it back on in a new environment, you want to try as hard as you can to identify things that people use that may not be working the way they used to. That's going to help you identify who's going to be calling you. And then lastly, I always recommend some sort of a feedback loop once you move into a production environment. Get something out there for users to submit comments or questions to, and follow up with them. Even if you say, hey, I got this, I'm going to look at it, give me a couple days, and then follow up on it. Our most successful implementations have had a feedback loop for many months right after a project to help the end users across all aspects of the business. Because if they send an email and they never hear anything back, they're less likely to adopt the system in the future, or they're more likely to complain about it when they're sitting at the bar having a drink with somebody after the fact. So that, I mean, that feedback loop is huge. And honestly, it puts the burden on the shoulders of people like Katie and Luke, because you guys are the GIS experts in your organization. So Luke, sorry.
I have something to add just real quick. I want to add something. One of the key takeaways for our POC was restart ArcGIS Pro. Restart ArcGIS Pro.
Yeah.
Restart ArcGIS Pro.
Save your work. Understand versioning. There's a lot of stuff that goes into these. We could spend the whole afternoon probably talking about different nuances. Oh, I forgot that was a big problem for so and so.
We found a bug too. I think it was named after us.
Oh,
we couldn't use the reroute tool, and I think it has something to do with our virtual environment. But
so, you know, as a entomologist when I was in college, I don't have a bug named after me. So congratulations. So hey, you know, just for time's sake, we kind of have two other things on the topics here. But you know, if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in chat, send them to Kathy, and we'll make sure we can follow up. But you know, we kind of added in a little bullet point around service partner or service provider discussions to assist with some of this work. And the point of this was, you all have your day jobs, and those rarely are able to go away. And I think we just wanted to talk about how you utilize service partners or service providers to assist with you, because there are still a lot of things when you go through this that you just have to do, right? You have to find your SMEs to participate in some of these discussions. So, you know, Katie, do you want to start and just kind of describe how Williams uses technology partners, service providers, vendors, and all of that stuff?
Yeah, that sounds good. So going into this project, you know, we were thinking along the same lines as you know, that we couldn't carve out enough time from our teams to take this on ourselves. We really needed an implementation partner. So we did work with an outside party the whole time, a third-party vendor, and they were really partners. I mean, we worked hand in hand the entire time, from, you know, requirements gathering. They ran a lot of our requirements gathering sessions, compiled those results. They worked on design, you know, directly with our IT group, and they did the migration. And so it was really invaluable to have Global was our partner at the time. And the key thing too that I think was really successful, and Luke, when you say you don't have a PM for your project, you'll laugh at this, because we had a PM on both sides. We had a PM from Williams as our project lead, and then Global had a PM too. And we actually felt like that really helped the relationship, because they were both kind of driving and organizing resources, driving us forward. And so I definitely recommend that. That's a good approach. Additionally, we had a training partner, and Julie's organization helped us with some training, and then we had another kind of third-party partner in like a secondary project manager to help us with our change management and communications, kind of all that stuff that we often like leave till the very end and rush through. So she was really invaluable in that. So we really leaned a lot on outside resources to get this done, and it was really beneficial for us to do it that way. And then I just want to circle back on two things really quick after you were talking about some of the positives, Luke. We also had the feedback loop, was super helpful. We had an issue log where people could log problems on SharePoint. That allowed us to kind of work through those systematically, prioritize them. And I mean, as with any large migration, we were working through those issues probably for 6 months to a year, just some of the lower priority ones just hanging out there for a while. But, we didn't lose them because we had them all centralized on one spot. And the other thing that I think was really helpful to do is we went through an exercise as we approached our cutover, single cutover go live type of weekend operation. We prioritized our apps as like day 1 apps, day 30 apps, because you get to the point where you've got to cut over, you've got to just pull the trigger, but maybe not everything's ready to go. And so we were able to say, okay, we need these things day 1. Like we cannot go live if we don't have these ready to go. But there's a few things, sheet cutter, that could wait a little while because we didn't have to cut sheets immediately. One call model could wait like 2 weeks, and then we needed that, up and running. And so I would recommend, it's a great exercise to go through.
Yeah.
To do that. And we partnered with our service provider on that too, because they were doing some of the development work on some of those pieces. So help them prioritize.
I mean, they'll have an intimate knowledge of how those migration went. A lot of times it was, this is missing. Well, you just need somebody to say, no, this is where we store it now. Mm-hmm. And have the time to walk them through it so where everybody understands it. Sure. Yep. So Luke?
Yeah, so I would say get the providers involved early and often, right? So as I mentioned, we were going through a transformation that also affected procurement. Okay, so it was a bit of a nightmare, but we got through it. Better late than never, right? And so yes, we do have implementation partners as well, and each of them have a PM. We just didn't have one internally. So yeah, and Luke, you might be familiar with the organization that is supporting us with the data migration. So we have support there. We have support with our Cartopack field data collection solution upgrading. And then of course Esri, right? So yeah, four different organizations all aligning on roadmaps.
Do you guys have an Azure service provider that's helping your IT organization through that?
No, we're working through the kinks ourselves. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of collaboration.
Yeah, it is.
So weeklies, multiple weeklies with your partners, right?
It's good. I mean, it's a good exercise. I think that everybody gets up front and you just describe yourself as a project team. We are all working together for the same goal. Let's do it. And once you kind of level set the whole project group, it really can go very well. There's plenty of other complications that you can come across. So our last discussion here. Oh, I'm sorry, Katie, did you say something?
No, that's okay. I failed to mention Esri too. Sorry, Jeff. Yeah, they were a huge partner for us too, especially with the UNet piece. I mean, it was so new, so we really worked closely with Esri to get the kinks worked out and get, everything running really well, and continue to work with them on, enhancements that we found that, would be useful. So make sure to mention that.
Absolutely. And, it's just been since, I don't know, Jeff has been with Esri for 5 years, 6 years, I can't remember. But it's just been in the last few years that we haven't had to explain how pipeline companies use stationing to Esri. So, I mean, just that part saving us hundreds of hours a year. And, I reiterate, even service providers that are on the phone, know your Esri reps. They they can help you with stuff, and they've really stepped up to the plate. There's a lot of very, very new technology that can be confusing and difficult to understand. So we really appreciate having them around as well. So Jeff, pass that along to your team. So the last thing we just wanted to kind of touch on, I know that we're running out of time, is a cloud discussion. I know that Luke, you guys are in Azure. Katie, you guys are on-prem. And at TRC, we're mostly AWS. And from my point of view, we've seen, once we are able to bust out all the kinks and problems from our AWS implementation, it is really a good collaborative environment. It is requiring our IT organization to understand a new way of administering infrastructure, but it also means I never have to buy a server again that is outdated by the time it gets plugged in and powered up. We work with, TRC does, we're not really a software company, but we work with vendors, software providers, and all that stuff, and it gives us a great collaborative area to work on that sort of stuff. So most of our technology partners just prefer to be in some sort of cloud environment. We're also working from home now, a lot of us. So it kind of takes the network performance of VPNing to someplace out in the middle of Iowa to get online in California. Luke, you want to describe, I would imagine that the Azure discussion was an IT-based discussion for a couple of years before the GIS was even considered for it. But what do you think?
We weren't even involved with the discussion. It was an enterprise decision.
Yeah.
We just had to jump on board. But yeah, I mean, just understanding the infrastructure and provisioning resources, right? So we have one group, the IT Foundation Platform, ITFP, who supports our enterprise environment, ArcGIS Enterprise, right? So that means they support a certain set of Azure resources, meaning Azure infrastructure, right? And then we had to provision our own Chevron Pipeline Power resource group for our mobile data collection, working with Cartapack. So that was all very unclear on how to even go about provisioning, setting up these environments, and then getting them to talk. But yeah, I mean, just go for it, right?
Just go for it.
Just go for it. Get in there and figure it out. Because we didn't have a manual to follow, we just we had to get in there and figure it out.
So Katie, what where are you guys at in a cloud discussion? Still talking?
Yeah, still talking. In fact, we have a GIS steering committee this afternoon, and Paul Huskins, our IT GIS manager, is going to cover kind of what we're thinking about for starting a kind of partial migration to the cloud. Maybe starting with some of our like read-only services or users, and not so much everything all at once. I guess technically we have a little bit of a cloud because we do have some content on ArcGIS Online. It's how we share data with third-party contractors. It's kind of part of our DR recovery, is we have a little bit of backup options on ArcGIS Online for some of our critical business needs. Mm-hmm. So we've dipped our toe a little bit into that, but definitely talking with Esri a lot and coming up with a plan. So we may start to implement in 2022, or not, just still looking at timing and resources for next year.
I mean, I remember 7 or 8 years ago traveling to operators to discuss them with someone from Amazon, like to discuss these security concerns that pipeline operators have. And we're largely behind that now. It's just a matter of time. And one other thing I would add about, like, I can only speak for AWS, but the same thing exists for Azure. When we would run pipeline risk for companies, large companies, 20 to 50,000 miles of pipe, sometimes that would take several weeks to run because it's just a giant dynamic segmentation exercise. It's a giant algorithm application and all that stuff. And by making elastic servers that can grow and shrink as you need them, we were able to decrease some of those risk runs from 2 or 3 weeks to 2 or 3 days. And you pay as you use. You can get on subscription programs, and it can really be affordable, especially for companies that don't have an entire IT organization that can support an ArcGIS enterprise environment as well as servers to support it, desktop apps. You can kind of implement a small footprint version of that. So look, we're about out of time. I saw Kathy jump back.
Here's some questions that came in.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that we get to some of those. So I turned on my camera. One question that came in is a workflow question. How is new data populated into a PODS model? So from a user standpoint, maybe somebody could tackle that.
Mm-hmm. So we edit using ArcGIS Pro, and then we also use Workflow Manager. So that was an intentional decision with our project to structure workflows using Esri's Workflow Manager product. So we have a number of different workflow managers, like a new pipeline naming tool to create a new pipeline. We've got gosh, I'm too far from it now to remember all the names, but we got about 4 or 5 different workflows that the editors use once they receive the survey data and the kind of the ticket to say, okay, we're ready to put this new asset in. So that's for one-off kind of new pipelines and new assets, and then a little bit of a different process for acquisitions, but probably the user's probably asking about single edits, I imagine.
Great, thank you. Is it possible to track the daily volume of work along a pipeline?
Mm-hmm. So we use we have like a ticketing system that we use, but also with many database models today, you can do editor tracking, so you can, and archiving. So we implemented both, where you can see who made the last edit and when did they make it. And that's been, I think, common for a while, but the archiving has been really useful. And we go back to it a lot. So it captures every single change to a data set in the archive tables. And so you can use that for great stats, so like how many pipeline edits are we making in a year? How many times are we editing our facility data set? So that, that's been a really useful thing. And I highly recommend archiving on the right data sets. You don't want to archive everything. It'll just clog up your database with a lot of records, but on anything that you're editing and you want to be able to recover, if you make a mistake, you can recover previous versions, or you can also just kind of look at history and changes over time.
I would also add that this can all be integrated into BI dashboards, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can finally view different metrics of our system, of our assets, and the usage of those assets, even down to data quality issues, and have dashboards around that stuff. And showing different parts of your organization, those things are very good ways to track adoption, which are very good ways to get them to understand why you keep asking for money, I guess, or resources, or that sort of stuff. Luke, do you have anything to add?
As far as editing, yeah, we're using APRs. So you have a location referencing extension, and you have pipeline editing, pipeline maintenance tools, right? Your reroutes, your retiring, all your typical changes to the geometry of a pipeline, or any attribute changes. With that, in order to do that, you have to configure branch versioning, which then you're editing a hosted feature service, right? You're no longer editing the feature class directly. You're editing a feature service layer that gets synced up to the source. So that's one. And then you're editing ArcGIS Pro, but then there's a web-based interface called the Event Editor, where you edit your events. And then with the field data collection or mobile data collection, you'll typically, we're going to have a staging schema that we can make edits to that schema in the database, and then run an FME job to push that to the PODS schema. We're still figuring out that workflow, but that's how we see it now. There may be a manual process after we push the events from FME to the pod source. But then, obviously we'll look to automate that manual process. But
yeah, and there's definitely some as-built requirements for data to go in the database that make it a bit more complicated than just right-click and append, especially with TVC requirements or document tracking or data completeness and all that stuff. I mean, Workflow Manager can definitely help you through that, especially when it comes to minimum requirements.
And we need to investigate Workflow Manager. It looks like it's a great tool. So we'll be looking forward to that in 2022.
I think that a good recommendation to the PODS organization is to build a Workflow Manager library. Kathy, are there any other questions?
Yeah, is the data model integrated with inspection on mobile applications like Survey 123?
I mean, I can speak a little bit to that. We've done multiple iterations of Survey 123 with a lot of companies will have a PL something form that says anytime your pipe is exposed, we have a specific amount of information that somebody needs to capture. So we will recreate these essentially PDF forms in Survey 123. And then as digs are scheduled, they will be pushed through Workforce to the individual that's going to be on site, and will pop up and they'll have a required set of information that they have to capture. That data will get saved, put into the Survey 123 data set, and we generally have some post-processing functions that get it formatted, ready to go, and that data might be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables, have some requirements there, and then it'll be in that kind of staging area like Luke was talking about, and then somebody will go and has built it in one way or another. So that's a very common Survey 123 workflow for us. Luke, Katie, do you guys have anything?
We don't use Survey 123 widely. We do use Collector for some data collection in the field, not for our pipe exposure form. We use a third-party application for that, which is integrated with our GIS system, and our PODS feeds that application, and then the data comes back in. So we have an integration between those two things.
And that's Luke, I would imagine your Cartopack app does similar function.
I was just going to comment on, we don't use Survey, well, we do have some Esri workflows for Esri's field maps. And we're basically going to set it up the same way that we have with Cartopack, where we have a staging schema where you edit in the field, make edits to in the field, and then push to the pod schema. If it belongs in the pod schema, right? Because it may not.
Yeah, very good point.
So.
Yeah, we did the mobile staging schema too. It seems like pretty common practice to do that, and then there's a QC of some of those edits to an extent before they come back in. Kathy, earlier I also forgot we have a bulk loader tool. So like if we have a really big pipeline project, we just finished one, and actually TRC was, I think, a provider on that for Kansas and Oklahoma Blue Stem project, and that was massive. So I mean, we're not going to do that one piece at a time. So we have a bulk loader through FME, and that loads the whole thing into the database, and then we just have a little cleanup to do afterwards.
Okay, 2 last questions, and maybe we could keep it to 3 to 5 minutes. But the first one is probably quick, but for a cloud implementation, does that require all of your desktop users to move to virtual desktops access in the cloud?
So yes and no would be. So your desktop, we recommend a virtual machine for all desktop users just for performance. also for ease of upgrades. However, the way that our ArcGIS enterprise environment is set up is we can connect to our database via our desktop. However, you're just going to get better performance by creating virtual machines. Originally, we used Citrix up until about 2 years ago, but it just became more and more problematic and more expensive. And we have completely switched over to actual Amazon workspaces for all of our end users. I will periodically connect to a STE database in AWS for my desktop just to look around at something, but it's generally you're not going to want to do much production work in. So that's kind of where I think that's
last question for, oh, I'm sorry.
Nope. So.
For Luke Hamlin, how is the FME tool being used for schema changes?
I hope it's not changing the schema too much. It's moving data from one database schema account to another, right? So users can edit in the staging, and then hopefully it's just a push, right? It's a push to the target, which would be the PODS database schema account.
Right.
And I'd hope that we're not using FME to monitor, or I mean to massage, if you will, the actual data schema, like as far as the columns, domains, anything like that. We should not be using FME for that. It should just be a read and write, basically.
A data read and write, not a schema.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Anything else, Kathy?
I think that concludes it. I'd like to thank all of you. This was just a dynamic conversation. I think we got to real, and good job to all of you, and thank you for participating in the panel, and great job on moderating, Luke. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. This is great.
Yeah, thank
thanks
you.
for the opportunity.
Yeah, great
Thanks,
talking with you all.
for nominating me.
Okay, let me see if I can. Let me start my slideshow again. So shifting from there, again, I appreciate all of the presenters that we've had talking about PODS and why it matters to your organization and the importance and relevance of PODS 7.0.1 and why we did some of the things that we have done, and most importantly, where we're going. It's really future designed, future focused, and as we just heard, a lot of good applications today. I'm going to ask Amber, are you seeing the proper screen report to membership?
I see the lead into our section.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so the next part, the last part of our presentation before we wrap up with some organizational information is the annual report to membership, which is something we provide at our fall conference generally. And we're going to talk about who our membership is and then also provide a little financial information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber.
Hello. So we have 94 active members. That's up about almost 1% from last year. 43% of those are large pipeline operators. 4% is other. 5% is government. 10% are small pipeline operators, and then we have 38% of those folks, or those companies, excuse me, are our service providers. If you want to slide to the next one, Kathy. So just to take a look at this for our year-over-year performance or membership. So from 2017 to 2021, we've had a slight growth in membership by corporation. Just every year, just a steady, we've picked up a few new companies. And then in terms of membership, which we had a slight downtick last year, but we also lost a large operator in Anadarko. They are no longer, so that they had quite a few members, and so that lowered our overall employee individual memberships, but only by a small bit. And we're expecting that we're going to do some housekeeping on those too, and hopefully we'll figure out, we'll do some marketing as well, and we're going to get those numbers up. So more people are involved in our organization within the companies that we have and the new companies that we hope to bring on. So with that, that's all I have on membership.
Great,
Kathy,
thank you.
to add?
So the next part that I want to provide is the report that we just received from our auditor. It's our financial report. Again, this is an obligation that we have to membership, is to provide that transparency. PODS Association remains a strong organization. Our assets have grown a little bit. We've always been around the $460,000 range. You can see our assets are about $550,000. A lot of what you see is within accounts receivable. This is a balance sheet from year end in 2020. We issue our annual membership dues in November or December. So a lot of that's going to be caught up in accounts receivable as then they are then paid. Our fund balance, or it's called net assets without donor restrictions, is $177,000, and that is healthy for our organization because that's oftentimes because we operate as a cash-based organization. That ends up being our savings that gets carried over to the next year. These are our operating revenues and expenses. Again, this is our membership fee has remained about the same year after year. We are always appreciative of our sponsorships. And I thank those who have chosen to sponsor PODS Association. I will say that Esri has been an annual sponsor for the organization for since we instituted this, and we're grateful for that. And then you can see our expenses and our net income, which is $13,000. It adds into our net assets for the year, keeping us healthy with a savings carryover of about $177,000. So I provide this to you. It is part of our bylaws that we provide this annually to our members, and transparency is important. We post this audit review on our website. You can go to that document as you'd like and grab it if you are interested. Now I'd like to call upon Todd again as our president to provide some final and closing remarks. Todd?
Thanks, Kathy. And thank you all again for attending today's session. We hope you're eager to begin using PODS 7.0.1. Thanks in particular to our speakers and panelists and all the volunteers who made the virtual conference happen. Before we wrap up today, I want to let everybody know that PODS elections for board positions are coming up soon. Please consider completing a nomination form and running for an open position. The election window opens in December and goes through mid-January. Finally, I want to extend a special thank you to Kathy Mayo, our PODS Executive Director, who has announced to us her intention to retire mid-next year, and we have initiated a search for Kathy's successor. Kathy, thank you for your service to PODS and our industry, and we appreciate your dedication and support. With that, please be sure to download PODS 7.0.1 and begin using it, and let us know what's good and what enhancements might be needed. Kathy, do we have any outstanding questions before we wrap up for today?
No, we don't, but I just want to say it has been really an honor to serve this organization. I think that we've taken on some critical and exciting work. It has broad implications to the industry. And as I watch, I will say I watch other sectors globally, and as I watch others, they are just scratching the surface for some of the work that PODS has achieved. And so I'm really proud of the release of 7.0.1 and where we are and what it can really mean for all of you. So those of you online, please look far and wide for a replacement for myself. I tell you, it's a very rewarding role, challenging role. It's something that I've truly enjoyed, and I just encourage you to pass it on, because we really need to cast a wide net. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I want you to know that the board has talked about when we might convene again in person. We are hoping in the first quarter or early in the second quarter that we will be able to convene in person. We will keep you posted on that. We will continue to have online presentations. We intend to have one more deep dive technical training before year end. And with that, we'll close. But thank you all for joining us. Good day.